The void was absolute. I floated in my EVA suit, tethered to the Odyssey, my home for the last 3 years. Before me hung Cygnus X1. It wasn't a hole, it was a presence, a complete and total absence of everything, so profound it felt like a solid object carved out of space-time itself. The stars around it didn't twinkle. They bent, their light warped into long, silent screams. My mission was simple. Observe, collect data, and don't get too close. The science was sound, the math was checked. But no equation could ever truly capture the feeling of staring into the abyss. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and lonely thing to behold. I checked my suit's readouts for the 100th time. Oxygen levels were optimal. Power was stable. My heart rate was a little high, but who could blame me? The silence was the most unnerving part. In space, there's no sound, of course, but this was different. It was a silence that consumed sound. A silence that had weight. I imagined it pulling the very thoughts from my head, stretching them into thin, meaningless strands. I was the sole witness to this cosmic monster, a tiny speck of life staring down the barrel of infinity. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming, making my ship, my mission, and my entire existence feel impossibly small. My job was to deploy a series of probes along the accretion disk, the swirling, superheated ring of matter spiraling into the black hole. It was a delicate dance, a cosmic ballet performed on the edge of oblivion. Each probe had to be released at the perfect velocity and angle. One wrong move, one tiny miscalculation in the thruster burn, and the probe would either be flung out into deep space or swallowed by the gravitational titan forever. I focused on my checklist, the familiar routine a comfort against the incomprehensible view. It was just physics, just another day at the office, if my office happened to be on the doorstep of hell. I finished deploying the final probe. It spun away gracefully, its small antenna blinking before it joined its siblings in their slow orbital decay. My work outside was done. It was time to head back inside the Odyssey. I gave the black hole one last look. It was just there, unmoving, unchanging, utterly indifferent. A perfect circle of nothingness against the backdrop of a billion distant suns. It didn't care that I was there. It didn't know I existed. It just was. And as I began my slow retreat back to the airlock, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a swimmer who had finally decided not to test the deep, dark water. Just as I reached the outer hatch of the airlock, it happened. A flash. It wasn't from a star or system malfunction. It was on my helmet's faceplate. A single pulsing blue light appeared on the internal heads-up display. It was a notification icon I had never seen before. It wasn't a standard ship alert or a suit diagnostic warning. This was alien. The light blinked with a steady, deliberate rhythm. It was calm. It was intentional. I froze, my hand hovering over the hatch control. Where did it come from? All my systems were green. The ship was quiet. The probes were operating as expected. I ran a quick diagnostic. The suit reported no errors. The ship's comms were silent, except for the faint background static of the cosmos. Yet the blue light persisted, pulsing gently in the corner of my vision. I toggled through my display settings, trying to identify the source. The signal's origin point was impossible. The telemetry data pinpointed its source directly from the center of the black hole's event horizon, from the point of no return. My blood ran cold. Nothing comes out of a black hole. Not light, not matter, not information. It was a fundamental law of physics. It was rule number 1. A signal from inside a black hole was a contradiction. It was like getting a phone call from a person who had been cremated. It simply could not happen. Yet there it was. The blue light pulsed on, a calm, insistent beacon from a place where existence was supposed to end. I wondered if I was hallucinating. Was it radiation sickness? Cosmic ray exposure? Had the isolation finally broken my mind? I shook my head, trying to clear it. The light remained. It was real. And if it was real, then everything I thought I knew about the universe was wrong. I had to get back inside. I had to analyze this. This was no longer a simple observation mission. This was something else entirely. I scrambled through the airlock, my heart pounding against my ribs. The mechanical hiss of the inner door ceiling felt like the closing of a chapter. The world I had known, with its predictable rules and stable physics, was gone. I was now in uncharted territory, guided by a single impossible blue light. The quiet solitude of my mission had been shattered by a mystery born from the darkest place in the universe.
had to know what it was.
Inside the cockpit, the ship was exactly as I had left it. Calm, quiet, all systems nominal. I removed my helmet, the recycled air feeling cool on my skin. The blue light was gone from my display, but the main communication screen on the bridge was active. It shouldn't have been. I had left it on standby. A low, distorted sound was coming from the speakers. It was a garbled mess of static and what sounded vaguely like human voices, all overlapping and stretched out of shape. It was like listening to a dozen radio stations at once, all playing through a broken speaker underwater. I sat down at the console, my hands flying across the keyboard. I tried to isolate the source of the audio feed. The system told me the signal was external, but its origin was tagged with the same impossible coordinates as the blue light, the black hole's singularity. As I worked to filter the noise, something else appeared on the screen. Symbols. They weren't any known language, human or computer. They looked like complex geometric patterns, almost like circuit diagrams, but with a strange, organic flow. They faded in and out, shifting and rearranging themselves as if they were alive. They felt like messages. These were not random glitches. The patterns had a structure, a repeating logic that was too complex for simple interference. The distorted voices, when I managed to isolate a few fragments, sounded like whispers. They were warped, their pitch and speed constantly changing, but they had the cadence of speech. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone or something was trying to communicate. They were sending a message from a place where communication was supposed to be impossible, from inside the black hole. The implications were staggering. Were they human? Aliens? A form of life beyond comprehension? The ship's computer struggled to analyze the data. It flagged the symbols as unidentifiable language and the audio as corrupted data with humanoid vocal signatures. Humanoid. That word echoed in my mind. I pushed the ship's sensors to their absolute limit, focusing every instrument I had on the black hole. I needed more data. I had to understand what was happening. I was no longer just an observer. I was part of a first contact scenario that defied every law of the known universe. The silent giant was no longer silent. It was talking, and I was the only one listening. As I edged the Odyssey closer to the event horizon, the universe outside my viewport began to warp. The distant stars were no longer pinpricks of light. They twisted into long, curved streaks, their colors smearing across the darkness like wet paint. Time itself felt wrong. The mission clock on my console seemed to tick slower, while my own heart felt like it was racing. The ship began to tremble, a low, deep vibration that resonated through the deck plates and up into my bones. It wasn't the shudder of thrusters, it was an external force. The black hole was pulling us in with an invisible, inexorable hand. Then I saw them. Behind a shimmering, transparent veil that had materialized across the cockpit, just beyond my reach, were figures. They looked exactly like me, mirrored versions of myself, dressed in the same flight suit, sitting in the same chair. There were 3 of them, layered like ghostly after images. They didn't move or speak. They just sat there, watching me, and they were smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was a knowing, eerie grin, like they knew a secret I didn't. They were echoes of me, reflections from another place, another time, another reality. The ship's alarms began to blare, a chaotic symphony of warnings about gravitational shear and structural integrity failure. The trembling intensified into violent shaking, and the lights flickered wildly. The symbols on the screen were now flashing frantically, the distorted voices rising in pitch to a desperate, urgent shriek. The pull was becoming irresistible. My mirrored selves behind the veil didn't react. Their serene, unsettling smiles never wavered, even as the ship around me was being torn apart. They looked at me with an expression of welcome, as if they had been waiting for me. Everything started to fade. The alarms, the shaking, the twisted starlight outside. All of it was dissolving into a perfect, quiet blackness. The cockpit, my hands on the controls, the terrifying beauty of the cosmos. It was all being erased. The last thing I saw was the calm face of one of my echoes, its smile widening. Then, just as the darkness consumed everything, a single clear whisper came through the radio, crisp and clean and impossibly close. It was a voice that was not my own, yet felt deeply familiar. We were never alone.